Germany, 1483. A time of desolation and disease. Where the plague could wipe out entire towns in days. And a quarter of all children died before they were 5. In this world, there was one great consolation. The Church and its promise of heaven. This promise had made the Church the most powerful institution on earth. Rich beyond counting, mightier than kings, but also corrupt and tyrannical. An empire that would be overturned by one man, Martin Luther. This is the story of a man swept from devotion to rebellion. Of a quest that would set old Europe afire. Spread revolution across nations. And unleash a voice of freedom that still resounds through the modern world. Martin Luther, the man who would one day challenge the supremacy of the Catholic Church, came from the most humble of origins. He grew up in a tiny town called Mansfeld in northern Germany. A hard-working community where the Church reigned supreme.
The most important thing to remember about late medieval religion is Christianity, that in a way it's the only game in town. It's the only major story that is allowed to be told, and that is told systematically, and it's embedded in institutions everywhere you go.
The Church stood at the center of Luther's childhood world. Its churches, monasteries and convents lay scattered across an empire that stretched from the far west of Ireland to the southern tip of Sicily. The Church's power lay in the one great comfort it promised. If you followed its rules and performed its rituals, you would escape the horrors of this world and find eternal happiness in heaven. But the Church exerted as much control over life on earth as it did in heaven. Its rules and laws permeated every aspect of daily life.
The Church declared whose birth was legitimate. It declared whose marriages were lawful. It declared whose wills were valid. And in that way, it actually inserted itself and its legal system into the lives of ordinary people at every point, not just its own members, but all the rest of the community.
Like so many around him, the young Luther embraced the Church. He served as an altar boy, sang in the choir. For here was a vision of harmony and peace, while life at home seems to have caused only pain and anguish. Luther's father, Hans, was a coppersmelter, one of a new and growing class of businessmen who had broken free from the old feudal system and set up on their own. Hans held fierce ambitions for his son. He was determined for him to climb even higher up the social ladder and become a lawyer. But Luther's was not a happy home.
Luther provides us with many memories of his childhood, and those memories are not entirely positive. They are memories of failure, memories of being punished by his father for his failures or for his disobedience. And I think the impression we get is that of someone with a sense of low self-esteem, someone who believes that he will not live up to the expectations that others have concerning him.
Hans Luther was a fierce judge of his son.
My father once whipped me so hard I ran away. I hated him, until he finally managed to win me back.
Luther's mother seems to have been little more sympathetic.
For the sake of stealing a nut, my mother once beat me until the blood flowed.
The fear of punishment and of failing would resound in Luther for the rest of his life. Although it would drive him not to fulfill his father's ambitions, but to spectacular rebellion. At first, Luther followed the path laid out for him. He was sent to the best schools in the area, and then, at the age of 18, he enrolled at the University of Erfurt. Compared to Luther's hometown, Erfurt was a bustling metropolis. It offered everything that might appeal to a young student, countless taverns and bars. In a time without clean drinking water, beer and wine were a staple drink. The city even had its own municipal brothel, run by the city council. But Erfurt was also unique in more elevated ways. At Erfurt, Luther blossomed. He became a keen musician, and he forged a number of close friendships with his fellow students.
Luther had really moved at around the age of 14, 15 to this context of learning, away from family, amongst peers, very, very demanding. So the connections between the young men there could be very, very strong, a terrific sort of bonding. They became family to each other. So friends were, at that stage in life, I think, were everything you had.
Luther stuck firmly to his studies. He gained his Bachelor of Arts and then his Master's degrees. All that remained was to take his final course in law, and he would be everything his father wished. But suddenly, all the certainties of Luther's life were shattered. In the year 1505, plague struck Erfurt. Disease ran amok through the city's narrow streets, leaving death and anguish in its wake.
The thing about the Black Death that most frightened people was that it came upon people without warning. Some people were struck down, others were spared. Some towns were devastated by it, while others quite close might be left alone. So it was impossible to explain. Nobody knew how you caught it at the time. Nobody knew why you caught it, except that they had a general sense that God was punishing them for their sins. It was a terrible, visible sign of punishment.
The Black Death had killed almost a half of Europe's population in the previous 100 years. But the epidemic would now touch Luther directly. 3 of his friends were killed by the disease. And this glimpse of man's mortality and the fear of God's wrath would lead to the first great turning point in Luther's life. Luther, now 23, was returning to Erfurt after a visit to his family, when suddenly he was caught in a massive thunderstorm. No one knows exactly what happened to Luther that night, but it struck him to his very soul.
Suddenly surrounded by the terror and agony of death, I felt constrained to vow myself to God.
With 3 friends already lost to the plague, now faced with death himself, Luther struck a bargain with God. He vowed to become a monk.